The scream tore through the night air like a blade, and Aria Dawson knew before she reached the village square that someone had died. She ran anyway, her boots pounding against the cobblestone streets of Millbrook, her breath forming white clouds in the frigid December air. The village had changed in the past 3 weeks, transformed from a sleepy rural town into something dark and afraid. People locked their doors before sunset now. Children were kept inside, and every morning someone checked the streets for bodies. Tonight they'd found one. Aria pushed through the gathering crowd, her nurse's instincts overriding her fear. She'd spent the last 5 years working in emergency medicine in Boston before returning home to care for her dying grandmother, and she'd seen enough death to recognize it from the hushed, horrified voices around her. But when she finally broke through to the inner circle, she wished she'd stayed away. Thomas Brennan lay sprawled across the fountain's edge, his eyes wide and empty, his throat torn open in a way that made her stomach turn. She'd gone to school with Thomas. He'd been kind, quiet, always willing to help his neighbors. Now he was just another victim. "That's the 7th one," someone whispered behind her. "We can't keep living like this. It's him. It has to be him." Aria turned to find Mayor Harrison pushing his way forward, his face red with fury and fear. Behind him came others, men she'd known her whole life, carrying torches that cast dancing shadows across the square. The flames reflected in their eyes, turning reasonable people into something dangerous. "We know where he is," Harrison announced, his voice carrying across the square. "The old Ashford estate on the hill. He's been there for months, hiding during the day, hunting at night. This ends now." "You can't know that," Aria heard herself say, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "You can't just— My brother is dead," someone shouted. "Sarah Chen is dead. The Morrison boy is dead. How many more before you stop defending monsters?" "I'm not defending anyone," Aria said, but her voice was lost in the rising anger of the crowd. She'd heard the rumors, of course. Everyone had. A stranger had purchased the abandoned Ashford estate 6 months ago, paying in cash never seen during daylight hours. People whispered the word vampire like it was something real, something possible. But Aria had dismissed it as small-town superstition. Until the death started. Until she'd seen the bodies, the wounds that couldn't be explained by animal attacks or human violence. Until she'd watched her rational modern world crack open to reveal something older and darker underneath. "We march tonight," Harrison declared. "We burn that place to the ground and everything in it." The crowd roared its approval, and Aria felt ice slide down her spine. This was madness. This was murder, vigilante justice based on fear and assumption. But as she looked around at the faces of her neighbors, at their grief and terror, she understood that nothing she said would stop them. She ran the Ashford estate sat on the highest hill overlooking Millbrook, a Gothic monstrosity of gray stone and pointed towers that had been abandoned for decades before its mysterious new owner arrived. Aria's lungs burned as she climbed the winding road, but she didn't slow down. Behind her she could hear the mob forming, voices rising in a chant that sounded more like a war cry than anything resembling justice. She didn't know why she was doing this. She should be home, safe, letting whatever was about to happen play out without her involvement. But something drove her forward, maybe the memory of Thomas's empty eyes, maybe the nurse's oath she'd taken to do no harm, maybe just the stubborn conviction that this was wrong. The estate's iron gates stood open, and Aria slipped through, her breath coming in harsh gasps. The grounds were immaculate despite years of neglect, the gardens perfectly maintained, the gravel paths swept clean. Someone lived here, someone cared for this place. She reached the massive front doors and pounded on them with both fists. "Hello? Please, if anyone's inside, you need to leave. They're coming, they're going to." The door opened so suddenly she stumbled forward. A hand caught her elbow, steadying her, and Aria looked up into the most beautiful face she'd ever seen. He was tall, impossibly tall, with skin as pale as moonlight and hair that fell past his shoulders in waves of pure white. His features were sharp and aristocratic, almost cruel in their perfection, and his eyes God. His eyes were the color of blood mixed with wine, ancient and knowing and utterly inhuman. "You should not be here," he said, and his voice was like velvet draped over steel, accented with something old world and elegant. His hand on her arm was cold even through her jacket. "You need to run," Aria gasped out. "The village, they think they're coming to kill you." One perfect white eyebrow arched. "To kill me? How quaint. I'm serious. They're bringing torches, weapons. They think you're responsible for the deaths. And are you so certain I am not?" The question hung in the air between them. Aria stared at him, at this impossible creature who could only be what every instinct screamed he was, and found herself searching his face for signs of guilt, of cruelty, of the monster everyone believed him to be. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I don't think mob justice is the answer either way." Something flickered in those crimson eyes, surprise perhaps, or amusement. "You are either very brave or very foolish, little human. They will be here soon. You should go." "Not without you. Why do you care what happens to me?" Aria opened her mouth to answer and realized she didn't have one. Why did she care? Why had she run all this way to warn a stranger, a creature that might very well be a killer? Before she could formulate a response, the sound of voices reached them, growing louder with each second. The mob was coming up the hill. The vampire's expression hardened. Go now. Hide in the gardens and do not emerge until this is finished. What are you going to do? What I must. He started to close the door, but Aria shoved her foot in the way. You can't fight them all. There are too many. I have survived far worse than an angry mob, Miss Dawson. Aria Dawson, Miss Dawson. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture that belonged to another century. I am Eirian Ashford Jäger, and I assure you I am in no danger from torches and pitchforks. Eirian, she repeated, tasting the name. It suited him, elegant, ancient, otherworldly. The mob's voices grew clearer now. She could pick out individual words. Monster, demon, death. The torchlight flickered through the trees lining the drive. Please, Aria said, and she wasn't even sure what she was asking for. Please run. Please don't hurt them. Please don't let this end in blood. Eirian looked down at her, and for a moment something passed between them, some recognition she couldn't name. Then he gently moved her aside and stepped out onto the portico, positioning himself at the top of the wide stone stairs. The mob rounded the final bend and stopped. There were perhaps 50 of them, men and women Aria had known her entire life, armed with torches, baseball bats, hunting rifles, and raw terror. At their head stood Mayor Harrison, his face twisted with righteous fury. Vampire, he shouted. We know what you are. We know what you've done. Eirian said nothing, simply stood there like a marble statue, his white hair stirring in the cold wind, his expression utterly calm. You've murdered our people, Harrison continued. 7 dead in 3 weeks. We've had enough. Tonight this ends. I have killed no one, Eirian said, his voice carrying easily across the distance. Your deaths are not my doing. Liar, someone screamed. Monster. We found the Morrison boy drained of blood, Harrison said. Sarah Chen's throat was torn out. We're not idiots. We know a vampire when we see one. You know folklore and fear, Eirian replied. You know nothing of me. Then explain yourself, Harrison demanded. Explain why people started dying the moment you arrived. Explain why you hide during the day. Explain what you are if not a killer. For a long moment, Eirian was silent. Then he descended 3 steps, moving with a grace that was distinctly predatory. The mob fell back, several people raising their weapons. I am what you believe me to be, Eirian said quietly. I am vampire, born in darkness over 5 centuries ago. I do not hide what I am, but I did not kill your people. Then who did? Someone shouted. I do not know, but I have hunted him these past 3 weeks, trying to find him before more innocent blood is spilled. You're trying to blame this on another vampire? Harrison's laugh was harsh and disbelieving. How convenient. There are others, Eirian said. Others who do not live by the old codes, who kill without thought or care. I came to this place seeking solitude, not prey. I feed from those who offer willingly, who come to me knowing what I am and accepting it. I have never taken a life unwilling, and we're just supposed to believe you. Harrison raised his torch higher. Supposed to trust the word of a monster? No, Eirian said softly. I expect you will do what humans always do when faced with what they fear. You will destroy it, whether innocent or guilty, because it makes you feel safe. The mob surged forward. Aria didn't think. She just moved, throwing herself down the stairs and positioning herself between Eirian and the approaching crowd. She spread her arms wide, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Stop, she screamed. Stop it, all of you, the mob faltered, confused by her presence. Aria, get out of the way, Harrison commanded. This doesn't concern you. It concerns all of us, Aria shot back. You're about to murder someone based on nothing but suspicion and fear. He admitted what he is. Being a vampire doesn't make him a murderer. We don't even know. We know enough, Harrison interrupted. Now move aside before you get hurt? No. The word hung in the air. Final and absolute. Aria felt Eirian's presence behind her, cold and still as death itself. She wondered if he could hear her heartbeat, if he could smell the fierce sweat on her skin. She wondered if he thought she was insane. You're defending a monster, someone called out. Has he enchanted you? Fed on you? He's done nothing to me, Aria said. I'm here because this is wrong. You're acting like killers yourselves. 7 people are dead, and killing an innocent won't bring them back. How do you know he's innocent? Harrison demanded. You just met him. Aria had no answer for that. She didn't know. She couldn't know. But something in those ancient crimson eyes, something in the way Eirian had warned her to run rather than use her as a hostage, told her the mob was wrong. Because I believe him, she said finally. Because my gut tells me you're about to make a terrible mistake. Your gut is going to get you killed, Harrison said, but there was something in his voice now, a hesitation that hadn't been there before. Then at least I'll die standing up for what's right. She heard Eirian inhale sharply behind her, a soft sound of surprise. The mob shifted uncertainly, some of the torches lowering. They'd come here to kill a monster, not to murder Aria Dawson. who'd nursed half their children through fevers and accidents. "This is insane," someone muttered. Whatever they should do was lost as a scream split the night. It came from behind the mob, down the hill toward the village, high-pitched and terrified. Everyone froze. "That came from Main Street," someone said. Another scream joined the first, and suddenly the mob was breaking apart, people running back toward town, toward their families and homes. Harrison stood his ground for a moment longer, glaring up at Eirian. "This isn't over," he warned. "It never is," Eirian replied. Then the mayor was running too, and only Aria remained, her legs shaking so badly she thought they might give out. The sound of screaming continued from the village, and she turned to look at Eirian, her eyes wide. "The real killer," she whispered. "Yes." His expression was grim. "Hunting, while I was distracted by this spectacle." "Clever. We have to help them. We? You said you've been hunting him. So hunt. I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. You are human, fragile. You would be a liability. I'm a trauma nurse with 5 years of ER experience. If there are wounded people down there, they need me." Eirian studied her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then, without warning, he moved. 1 second he stood 3 feet away. The next his arm was around her waist, and the world became a blur of motion and cold wind. Aria's stomach lurched, her vision swimming, and then they were standing in the village square, next to the fountain where Thomas Brennan's body had lain just an hour before. The square was chaos. People ran in every direction, screaming, panicking. Aria staggered as Eirian released her, fighting down nausea. "What the hell was that?" "Vampire speed. Try not to vomit on me. I'm a professional," she managed, though her head was spinning. "I don't vomit. First time for everything." Despite the situation, Aria almost smiled. Then she saw the blood. It painted the cobblestones in dark streaks, led in trails toward the alley beside the hardware store. Fresh blood still steaming in the cold air. Eirian followed her gaze, and his entire body went rigid. "Stay close to me," he commanded.
"Do not leave my side for any reason. Do you understand?"
"Yes." They moved toward the alley, Eirian slightly ahead, his body positioned between Aria and whatever lay in the darkness. As they drew closer, Aria heard sounds, wet, tearing sounds that made her stomach clench. She'd heard similar sounds in the ER, the terrible noise of trauma and violence. The alley was dark, but Eirian seemed to have no trouble seeing. He stopped so abruptly that Aria walked into his back. His body was hard as stone and just as cold beneath his clothes. "Show yourself," Eirian said quietly. Laughter echoed from the shadows, high and manic. Then a figure stepped into the dim light from the street, and Aria's breath caught in her throat. He was young, or appeared young, with the same white skin and pale hair as Eirian. But where Eirian was elegant and controlled, this vampire was wild, feral. Blood covered his mouth and chest, and he clutched something in his arms. Someone. Aria realized with horror, a woman limp and unmoving. "Kazan," the young vampire said, still laughing. "Come to stop the fun again. Kazan," Aria whispered. "Nikolai," Eirian said, and there was such cold fury in his voice that Aria felt it like a physical force. "I warned you what would happen if you continued this. You warned, you threatened, you brooded dramatically." Nikolai's grin was savage. "But you never did anything, did you? Because I'm family and the old codes matter so much to you. The old codes say I should execute for breaking the first law." "The first law?" Nikolai spat. "Never kill unless threatened, never leave evidence, never let the humans know we exist. Your precious laws are choking us, Eirian. We're apex predators pretending to be house cats. We survive by maintaining the balance," Eirian said. "By living alongside humans, not as their butchers. I'm tired of hiding what I am." Nikolai dropped the woman's body carelessly. She hit the ground with a sickening thud, and Aria saw with relief that her chest still moved. Unconscious, blood loss but alive. "I'm tired of your rules and your judgment." "Then you will die tired." Eirian moved. This time Aria saw it properly, the inhuman speed, the predatory grace. He slammed into Nikolai with enough force to crack the brick wall behind them. The two vampires became a blur of motion, too fast for human eyes to track. Aria heard impacts like thunderclaps, saw chunks of masonry flying. The woman. Focus on the woman. Aria dropped to her knees beside the unconscious victim, her training taking over. She pressed her fingers to the woman's throat, feeling for a pulse, weak but present. The wounds were on her inner arm, not her throat, 2 puncture marks surrounded by bruising. Vampire bite, her mind supplied clinically. Like that was a normal diagnosis now. She shrugged out of her jacket and pressed it against the wounds, applying pressure. The woman groaned but didn't wake. "Stay with me," Aria murmured. "You're going to be okay, I've got you." Something hit the ground beside her hard enough to crater the cobblestones. Nikolai. He looked up at her with wild eyes, and for the first time she saw the real monster underneath the human facade. His face had changed, become more angular and predatory, his fangs extending nearly 2 inches past his lips. "Fresh blood," he hissed, staring at Aria with naked hunger. "You brought a snack, cousin?" Eirian appeared above him, hauling him up by the throat. "She is under my protection. You will not touch her." "Protection? You've gone soft." Nikolai laughed even as Eirian's grip tightened. Is she your pet? Your beloved? How sweet, how pathetically human of you. She is brave and kind and worth 1,000 of you. The words made something warm bloom in Aria's chest despite the terror of the situation. Eirian slammed Nikolai against the wall again, and this time she heard bones crack. Leave Millbrook, Eirian commanded. Leave this country, this continent. I will not warn you again, or what? You'll kill me? Nikolai's grin was bloody and broken. We both know you won't. You're too bound by the old ways, too much your father's son. I am my father's son, Eirian agreed softly. Which is why I know exactly how to make you suffer before I end you. For the first time, fear flickered across Nikolai's face. Then Eirian moved again, and there was a wet, tearing sound. Nikolai screamed, a sound of pure agony that echoed through the alley. Eirian threw something to the ground, a hand, Aria realized with sick fascination. A vampire's severed hand. Silver bullets in the bones, Eirian said calmly as Nikolai writhed. They will poison you slowly, painfully, unless you run far and fast enough to find a healer willing to extract them. I suggest you start running. Nikolai fled, moving in that impossible vampire speed, his screams fading into the distance. Eirian stood still for a moment, his back to Aria, his breathing harsh and uneven. Then he turned, and his face was a mask of concern. Are you hurt? I'm fine, but she needs a hospital. Eirian knelt beside them, examining the woman with an expert eye. She will survive, but yes, she needs medical attention. He looked at Aria with something that might have been respect. You did not run. You told me to stay close. Most humans would have fled regardless. I'm not most humans, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. No, you most certainly are not. He lifted the woman as easily as if she weighed nothing, cradling her with surprising gentleness. I will take her to the hospital. You should go home, lock your doors. Nikolai will not return tonight, but there may be others who question your association with me. Others like the mob that tried to kill you an hour ago? Yes. Aria stood, swaying slightly. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her shaky and exhausted. What happens now? Now you go home and try to forget this night ever happened. That's not likely. Eirian studied her with those ancient eyes. No, I suppose it is not. You have seen too much, become too entangled in my world. I am sorry for that. I'm not. The words surprised them both. Aria wasn't even sure why she'd said them, except that they felt true. Despite the violence, despite the terror, some part of her felt more alive than she had in years. You should be, Eirian said quietly. My world is dangerous, Miss Dawson. It is blood and darkness and choices that would haunt you. And what about your choices? Aria asked. You could have killed those people tonight. The mob, they were completely at your mercy. But you didn't hurt anyone, because I am not the monster they believe me to be. I know, that's why I stepped between you and them. Something flickered in his expression, vulnerable and surprised. Then he shook his head. I must go. She is losing blood. He moved to leave, then paused. Thank you, Aria Dawson, for your belief, foolish though it may be, for your courage, foolish though it certainly was. You may have saved my life tonight. I thought you said you were in no danger from torches and pitchforks, I lied. His smile was brief but genuine. They would not have killed me, but they would have driven me from my home, from the first peace I have known in decades. That is its own kind of death. Then he was gone, moving so fast he simply vanished, leaving Aria alone in the alley with blood on her hands and 100 questions burning in her mind. The next morning, Aria woke to find Millbrook transformed once again. News had spread about the attack in the village square, about the mysterious figure who had saved Jennifer Walsh from bleeding out in an alley. The story grew with each telling. Some claimed it was an angel, others a vigilante. A few insisted it was a second vampire fighting the first. No one mentioned that Aria had been there. She was grateful for that small mercy. She spent the morning at her grandmother's house, trying to focus on normal things: laundry, grocery shopping, checking her grandmother's medications. But her mind kept drifting back to the night before, to crimson eyes and impossible speed, and the feeling of standing between a man and certain death, a vampire. She'd defended a vampire. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it made her curious. Eirian had been nothing like the movies portrayed. He wasn't a mindless killer or a sparkly romantic fantasy. He was something stranger and more complex, ancient and dangerous, but also weary, burdened by codes and responsibility, and he'd called her brave. Around noon, a knock came at the door. Aria opened it to find Mayor Harrison standing on her porch, looking 20 years older than he had the night before. Aria, may I come in? She stepped aside, wary. Harrison had never visited her grandmother's house before. He moved into the living room like a man going to his execution, his shoulders bowed. Jennifer Walsh is going to be okay, he said without preamble. The doctors said another 10 minutes and she would have died from blood loss. Someone saved her life. That's good news. It was him, wasn't it? The vampire from the estate. Aria said nothing. The police found evidence of a fight in that alley. Blood, lots of it, but not human. They're calling it vandalism, refusing to acknowledge what's really happening. Harrison looked at her with exhausted eyes. I owe you an apology, and I owe him one too, if vampires accept such things. You didn't know, Aria said quietly. I should have known. Should have investigated before leading an angry mob to someone's door. He rubbed his face. There was another attack last night, out on Route 6. A trucker stopped at the rest area. He's dead, same wounds as the others. The real killer is still out there. Eirian said, his cousin Eirian. That's his name? Aria nodded. The killer is his cousin Nikolai. Eirian's been hunting him, trying to stop him. That's why he came to Millbrook in the first place. A vampire hunting a vampire. Harrison laughed bitterly. This whole situation is insane. A month ago, I would have said vampires were fiction. Now I'm apologizing to one. What will you do? What can I do? Put out a warrant for Nikolai's arrest? Hang up garlic and crosses? We're out of our depth here, Aria. Way out. He stood to leave, then paused. For what's worth? What you did last night, stepping between that vampire and the mob that took guts. Stupid guts, but guts nonetheless. Thanks. I think. After Harrison left, Aria tried to return to her normal routine. But normal felt impossible now, like trying to fit back into clothes she'd outgrown. Her world had expanded in a single night, stretched to include things that shouldn't exist, and she couldn't unknow what she now knew. As evening approached, she made a decision. The drive up to the Ashford estate felt longer in daylight, the road winding and steep. Aria's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she navigated the curves, second-guessing herself with every turn. What was she doing? What could she possibly say? Thanks for not killing everyone last night. Sorry about the mob. I can't stop thinking about you. That last thought made her grimace. This wasn't some romantic fantasy. Eirian was a 500-year-old vampire who'd probably forgotten more about life than she'd ever know. He didn't need some human nurse showing up on his doorstep with what? Curiosity? Gratitude? Something more complicated that she didn't want to name. The estate looked different in daylight, less gothic and more simply beautiful. The gardens were in full winter splendor, evergreens and carefully cultivated winter roses, creating a landscape that belonged in a magazine. Aria parked her car and approached the front door, her heart hammering. She knocked, no answer. Of course. It was 3 in the afternoon, broad daylight. If the vampire legends were true, Eirian would be what? Sleeping? Unable to wake? She felt foolish for not considering this. If you're attempting to stake me in my sleep, I should warn you that I am a very light sleeper. Aria spun around. Eirian stood behind her, somehow having approached without a sound. He wore different clothes than the night before, dark slacks and a deep burgundy shirt that made his pale skin seem luminous. His white hair was tied back, revealing the sharp planes of his face. I thought vampires couldn't be awake during the day, Aria said. We cannot be in direct sunlight. Shade is acceptable if uncomfortable. He gestured to the shadowed portico where they stood. Though I confess, I am surprised to see you here, Miss Dawson. Most humans who encounter my kind tend to flee, not return for social calls. I'm not here for a social call. I wanted to. She paused, realizing she hadn't actually planned what to say. I wanted to make sure you were okay. And to find out what happens next. What happens next is that you go home and resume your life. This is not your battle. You keep saying that, but I'm already involved. The mayor came to see me this morning. The whole town is talking about what happened. They know there are vampires here now. Eirian's expression tightened. That is precisely what I wish to avoid. The more humans know of our existence, the more dangerous things become for both our kinds. So what's your plan? Hide up here on your hill and hope Nikolai doesn't come back? Nikolai will not return. I wounded him with silver. It will take weeks for him to heal, and by then he will have moved on to hunting grounds where I am not present. And if he doesn't, if he comes back and kills more people, then I will end him. Eirian said it simply, without emotion. But Aria heard the weight behind the words. He is family, but he has broken our laws too many times. The councils will support my decision. Councils? The vampire governance. Each region has its ruling house, its laws and codes. I am of the House of Jäger, one of the oldest bloodlines in Europe. He stopped, studying her. Why am I telling you this? Because I asked? No, because you genuinely want to know. Because you look at me and see a person rather than a monster. He moved closer, close enough that Aria could feel the cold radiating from his body. That is dangerous, Aria Dawson. Dangerous for you, and perhaps more dangerous for me. Why dangerous for you? Because it has been a very long time since anyone looked at me the way you do. With curiosity rather than fear. With interest rather than horror. His voice dropped lower. It makes me want things I have not wanted in decades. Things I have no right to want from a human woman with her whole life ahead of her. Aria's breath caught. The air between them felt electric, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. She should step back, she knew. Should leave while she still could. But her feet remained rooted to the spot. What kind of things? She asked softly. Dangerous things. Eirian reached out, his fingers hovering just above her cheek without touching. You saved my life last night. More than that, you believed in me when no one else did. That is a gift I do not take lightly. It wasn't a gift, it was just the right thing to do, perhaps. His hand dropped. But right or not, it has created a bond between us. I feel responsible for you now, protective. That is my nature. When someone shows me loyalty, I return it tenfold, but you must understand what that means. A vampire's protection is not a light thing. It is possessive and absolute. It would change your life. My life already changed. Last night, when I learned monsters were real. I am not a monster. I know, that's exactly my point. They stood there in the shadowed portico, the winter afternoon fading around them. Aria could see the conflict in Eirian's ancient eyes, the war between what he wanted and what he believed was right. You should go, he said finally, before this becomes more complicated than it already is. And if I don't want to go? Aria, I've spent the last 5 years working myself into exhaustion, she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. Taking care of other people, fixing their problems, saving their lives when I could. I came back to Millbrook because my grandmother is dying and she needed me. I've been doing the right thing, the responsible thing, for so long that I can't remember the last time I did something just because I wanted to. And what do you want? I want to understand. I want to know more about your world, about you. She took a breath. I want to not be alone for a while, and I think maybe you want that too. Eirian was silent for a long moment. Then he stepped back and opened the front door. Come inside, he said quietly. But understand that crossing this threshold means accepting what I am, accepting the danger that comes with knowing me. If you walk through this door, there is no going back to ignorant safety. Aria didn't hesitate. She walked inside. The interior of the Ashford estate was breathtaking. High ceilings with elaborate plasterwork, walls lined with art that looked genuinely ancient, furniture that belonged in museums. But it wasn't cold or sterile like a museum. There were books everywhere, stacked on tables and shelves, some lying open as if recently read. Modern technology mixed with antique elegance, a state-of-the-art sound system next to a harpsichord, a sleek laptop on a 16th-century writing desk. This is beautiful, Aria breathed. I have had a long time to collect things. Eirian moved through the space with casual grace, lighting lamps against the gathering darkness. 5 centuries of accumulated possessions tends to result in clutter. This isn't clutter, it's like a personal history museum. An apt description. Every object here has a story, a memory, some pleasant, many not. He gestured to a chair near the fireplace. Please sit. I would offer you refreshment. But I'm afraid I have nothing suitable for human consumption in the house. That's okay, I'm not hungry. Aria sat, her eyes roaming the room, drinking in details. A painting of what looked like a medieval court. A sword mounted above the mantel. Photographs, actual photographs. Not paintings showing people in Victorian-era clothing. Is that you? She pointed to a photograph of a young man with white hair and an unsmiling face, standing beside an older woman in elaborate dress. My mother, Eirian said quietly. Taken in 1887, shortly before she passed into the final sleep. The final sleep? What happens to vampires who grow weary of immortality? We do not age, but we can choose to end our existence. My mother was nearly 800 years old. She had seen enough of the world. He stared at the photograph with an expression Aria couldn't read. I was barely a century old when she left me. Still young by vampire standards, still learning what it meant to be what we are. That must have been hard. It was. But it taught me that immortality is not always a gift. Sometimes it is a burden, watching everyone you love fade while you remain unchanged. He turned to look at her. That is why entanglements with humans are discouraged among my kind. Your lives are so brief, so fragile. We love you, we lose you, and we remember for centuries afterward. Is that why you live alone? I live alone because I choose solitude over the politics of vampire courts. My bloodline is old and powerful. There are always those who seek alliance or wish to use the Jäger name for their own purposes. I grew tired of the games, the constant maneuvering. So I came here to this quiet corner of the world seeking peace, and found Nikolai instead. Eirian's expression darkened. Nikolai is my brother's son, born to vampirism only 30 years ago. He rejected our teachings, our codes. He believes vampires should rule openly over humans. Take what they want without restraint. He is young and stupid and dangerous. But you didn't kill him. No, I should have, but he is family. The last connection I have to my brother who died in the Great War. Eirian's hands clenched. I thought I could teach him, guide him to a better path. Instead, I enabled his cruelty. The deaths in your village are as much my responsibility as his. That's not true, isn't it? I knew what he was capable of. I should have ended him months ago before innocent people died. He looked at her with raw honesty. You call me noble, but I am as guilty as he is, just too cowardly to take the necessary action. Aria rose from her chair and crossed to where Eirian stood. Up close she could see the fine lines of tension around his eyes, the weight of centuries pressing down on him. She did something that probably qualified as suicidal. She reached out and took his cold hand in her warm one. Caring about family doesn't make you a coward, she said. It makes you human, or whatever the vampire equivalent is. His fingers tightened around hers. You are a strange woman, Aria Dawson. You should fear me, yet you hold my hand. You should hate me for bringing danger to your home. Yet you offer comfort. I do not understand you. Good, I'd hate to be predictable. Eirian laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and pleasure. The laugh transformed his face, made him look younger, less burdened. Aria felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. This was dangerous. Not because Eirian was a vampire, but because she was starting to feel things she had no business feeling. Attraction, yes, but also tenderness, protectiveness, a desire to ease the ancient sorrow she saw in his eyes. Tell me about your world, she said, trying to redirect her thoughts to safer territory. How does it all work? The courts, the laws, all of it. Eirian studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Very well, if you truly wish to understand, I will explain. But it will take time. I have time. Yes, he said softly, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that sent shivers up her arm. Perhaps you do. They talked for hours. Eirian explained the hidden world of vampires, the ancient houses that ruled different territories, the laws that governed behavior, the delicate balance maintained between vampire and human societies. He spoke of blood bonds and turning rituals, of the political machinations that filled immortal courts. He described hunting customs that had existed for millennia, the ethics of feeding, the complications of vampire reproduction. Aria listened, fascinated. It was like discovering an entire civilization that existed in the shadows of her own world, complex and nuanced, and nothing like the simplistic tales told in movies and books. We are not undead, Eirian explained at one point. That is a human myth. We are transformed, certainly, but we live. Our hearts beat, though slowly. We breathe, though we have little need for air. We are simply different. Another branch of evolution, perhaps, or something more supernatural. Even we do not fully understand our own origins. And the turning process, Aria asked. How does someone become a vampire? An exchange of blood and intent. The vampire must drain the human nearly to death, then feed them their own blood while consciously willing the change. It is not easy, not accidental. Every vampire you meet was chosen deliberately. He paused. There are laws governing who can be turned and when. One cannot simply transform humans at whim. The councils must approve each new vampire, ensure they understand what they are accepting. What happens if someone breaks that law? Execution. For both the maker and the newly turned. His expression was grave. We are not a numerous people, Aria. Perhaps 50,000 vampires exist worldwide, hidden among billions of humans. We survive by being cautious, by maintaining strict control over our numbers and our behavior. Those who threaten that survival are eliminated without mercy. And Nikolai? Nikolai was legally turned, approved by the House of Jäger and the European Council. But his crimes since then have earned him a death sentence. I have the authority to carry it out. I simply lack the will. He looked at her. Until last night, when he nearly killed Jennifer Walsh. When he threatened you. I will not show mercy again. Aria heard the absolute conviction in his voice and shivered. This was the other side of Eirian, not the weary immortal seeking peace, but the apex predator, the ancient power that had survived 5 centuries of dangers she couldn't imagine. I should be afraid of you, she murmured. Yes, you should, but I'm not. That troubles me more than I can express. Eirian released her hand and moved to the window, staring out at the dark gardens. You make me want to be better than I am, Aria. Better than I have been in a very long time. That is dangerous for both of us. Why is it dangerous for you? Because hope is the cruelest thing you can give an immortal. Hope makes us believe we can have normal things, love, connection, a future. But humans die and we remain. Hope just makes the inevitable loss more painful. Aria stood and joined him at the window. Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft flakes drifting through the darkness. What if she stopped, unsure how to voice the question? What if what? What if someone wanted to become a vampire? If they knew what they were asking for, understood the costs, would that be allowed? Eirian turned to look at her sharply. Are you asking if I would turn you? I'm asking hypothetically. Nothing about this conversation is hypothetical. He moved closer, his eyes intense. Listen to me carefully. Becoming a vampire is not a romantic fantasy. It is death and rebirth, agony that lasts for days. It is losing the sunlight forever, losing the taste of food, losing the easy warmth of human connection. It is watching everyone you know grow old and die while you remain frozen. It is centuries of existence with no promise of purpose or peace. But it's also what you are, Aria said. And you're not empty or evil. You've built a life, found meaning. Why couldn't someone else? Because I have had 500 years to learn how to be what I am. Most new vampires go mad within the first decade. The hunger consumes them, or the isolation, or the weight of their choices. 1 in 3 newly turned vampires request final death within 50 years. The odds are not favorable, but some make it. Some. He cupped her face with one cold hand, his touch surprisingly gentle. Aria, I have known you for less than 24 hours. In that time you have turned my ordered existence upside down. You make me feel things I thought long buried. But I will not turn you. I will not be responsible for destroying your humanity, your warmth, your beautiful mortal life. Do not ask me to." Tears pricked Aria's eyes, though she wasn't sure why. She didn't want to be a vampire, did she? That wasn't what this was about. Except maybe it was, in some confused way. Maybe she was looking for a reason to stay in his world, to not have to walk away from whatever this was between them. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I wasn't trying to. I don't even know what I was trying to say. You were trying to find a way for this to work, a way for a human woman and a vampire to have something more than a brief encounter before reality separates them." Eirian's thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "I have been thinking the same thing since you walked through my door. But there is no easy answer, Aria. Only complicated ones. What if complicated is okay? Complicated means you will age while I do not. Complicated means hiding our association from your community, from my people. Complicated means accepting that I am a killer no matter how civilized I pretend to be. I have taken lives, Aria. Many lives over my centuries. Not innocence, but I am not the noble protector you want me to be. I don't want you to be noble. I want you to be real. This is me being real. I am selfish enough to want your company despite knowing it will hurt you eventually. I am possessive enough to dislike the thought of you with anyone else. I am dangerous enough that being near me puts you at risk. And I am lonely enough that I am considering ignoring all of that because you make me feel less alone." They stood frozen, his hand still cupping her face, her hand clutching his wrist. The snow fell heavier outside, blanketing the world in white silence. "Stay," Eirian said finally. "Not forever, not for transformation, but stay tonight. Let me be selfish for a few hours. Let us see if this impossible thing between us has any substance or if it is merely adrenaline and novelty. I'll stay." The words were barely out of her mouth before Eirian kissed her. His lips were cold but not unpleasant, firm and demanding. Aria gasped against his mouth, and he took advantage, deepening the kiss with a hunger that made her knees weak. She'd been kissed before, of course, but never like this, never with such focused intensity, such barely restrained need. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, though Eirian hardly needed to breathe, Aria felt like her entire world had shifted on its axis. "I have wanted to do that since you stepped between me and that mob," Eirian admitted, his voice rough. "Watching you defend me. So fierce and brave and utterly foolish, it undid something in me." "It was pretty foolish," Aria agreed breathlessly. "Magnificently foolish, gloriously stupid. I have never seen anything like it." He kissed her again, softer this time, almost reverent. "You are extraordinary, Aria Dawson, and I am very likely to fall in love with you if you continue being so."
Would that be so bad?
"Yes, it would be terrible and wonderful and completely inadvisable." He rested his forehead against hers. "But I find I do not care about advisable anymore. I only care about this moment. This woman in my arms, everything else can wait." They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, the rest of the world falling away. Aria had never felt so safe and so endangered at the same time, had never wanted something so much while knowing it was probably a mistake. Eventually, Eirian pulled back and led her to the library, a massive room lined floor to ceiling with books in a dozen languages. They settled on a leather sofa, Aria curled against Eirian's side, his arm around her shoulders. He was cold, but not uncomfortably so, and there was something soothing about his stillness. "Tell me about your life," Eirian said. "I have told you my history, I would know yours." So Aria talked. She told him about growing up in Millbrook, about her dreams of becoming a doctor that turned into nursing school when money was tight. She spoke about her years in Boston, the organized chaos of the ER, the lives saved and lost. She explained about her grandmother, the woman who'd raised her after her parents died, now fading from Alzheimer's. "She doesn't remember me anymore," Aria said quietly. "I sit with her and she looks at me like I'm a stranger. Some days she thinks I'm her sister who died 40 years ago. It's like losing her slowly, piece by piece. I am sorry, that is a cruel way to lose someone. At least I get to say goodbye in a way. That's more than some people get." Eirian was quiet for a moment. "When my mother chose the final sleep, I was with her. We talked for hours beforehand, said everything that needed saying. I held her hand as she drifted away, felt her centuries of life finally ending. It was sad but also peaceful. She was ready, she had lived enough." He paused. "Your grandmother has lived her life too, Aria. What is happening to her is not fair, but perhaps it is time to let her go gently. I know, I'm not ready. We are never ready to lose those we love." They talked through the night, about everything and nothing. Aria learned about Eirian's travels through the centuries, the historical events he'd witnessed, the changes he'd seen in the world. She told him about medical school, about her favorite books, about the small dreams she'd set aside to take care of others. As dawn approached, Eirian grew more lethargic. His movements slowed, his speech becoming slightly slurred. "You need to rest," Aria said, concerned. "I do. The day sleep is not optional for my kind, merely delayed with effort." He managed a tired smile. "You should go home. Your grandmother will worry. She won't remember to worry." The words came out more bitter than Aria intended. "Sorry. That was true and sad. Eirian stood swaying slightly. Will you come back tonight? Do you want me to? More than is wise, but yes, I want you to come back. He stopped, struggling for words. I want to see where this leads, even knowing it will probably end in heartbreak. Is that selfish of me? Probably. But I want the same thing, so we're equally selfish. Eirian walked her to the door, moving more slowly now. The first light of dawn was touching the horizon, and he stayed carefully in the shadows. Be safe, Aria. If you see any sign of Nikolai, call me immediately. He handed her a card with a phone number written in elegant script. I will come, day sleep or not. I'll be careful. I find I very much need you to stay alive and unharmed. He kissed her once more, a brief press of lips that still managed to steal her breath.
Until tonight, then.
Aria drove home in a daze, her mind reeling from everything that had happened. Less than 48 hours ago, she'd been a normal woman living a normal life. Now she was involved with a vampire, had witnessed an attempted murder, and had apparently decided that all of this was fine. She was definitely losing her mind. But as she climbed into her own bed and fell into exhausted sleep, her last thought was of crimson eyes and cold hands, and the feeling of being truly seen for the first time in years. The next week passed in a blur. By day, Aria tended to her grandmother, worked shifts at the community clinic, and tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. By night, she drove up the hill to the Ashford estate and fell into Eirian's world. They talked endlessly about everything. Eirian was curious about modern life in ways that surprised her. He wanted to understand social media, streaming services, current politics. In return, he taught her about vampire culture, the intricate social structures that governed immortal society. We are not so different from humans in many ways, he explained one evening as they sat in his library. We have the same capacity for love and hate, for nobility and cruelty. Immortality does not make us wiser, merely more experienced in being foolish. He also trained her over her protests. If you insist on being part of my life, you must know how to protect yourself, he said firmly, teaching her how to recognize vampire feeding signs, how to use weapons she'd never imagined needing. He gave her a silver knife that had belonged to his mother. Silver burns us, weakens us, he explained. Keep this with you always. If something happens to me, if another vampire threatens you, use it. Nothing's going to happen to you. Humor me. The knife was beautiful and deadly, etched with symbols Eirian said were protection wards from the old country. Aria carried it in her bag, this tangible reminder that her life had become something out of a dark fairy tale. They didn't talk about the future. By unspoken agreement, they focused on the present, these stolen hours each night, this impossible connection growing between them. Aria knew it couldn't last. Eventually, they would have to make decisions, face reality. But for now, she let herself exist in this strange, beautiful limbo. Millbrook slowly returned to normal. There had been no more attacks since the night in the alley. Nikolai seemed to have disappeared, and while people remained nervous, the talk of vampires and monsters faded to whispers. Mayor Harrison quietly spread the word that the killings had been the work of a serial criminal who'd moved on to another area. Most people accepted this explanation, eager to return to comfortable reality. A few, the ones who'd been part of the mob that night, knew the truth, but they kept silent. There was an unspoken agreement to let the impossible remain unspoken. Aria's grandmother deteriorated. Some days she was lucid, almost her old self. Other days she didn't recognize her own house, called for people long dead. Aria sat with her, held her hand, and tried not to think about what came next. You seem different lately, her grandmother said during one of her clear moments. They were having tea in the kitchen, sunlight streaming through the windows. Happier. Is there a young man? Something like that, Aria admitted. Good. You spend too much time taking care of an old woman. You should be living your life. I am living my life right here with you. Her grandmother patted her hand with affection and exasperation. I'm dying, sweetheart. We both know it. And when I'm gone, I don't want you stuck in this house, trapped by obligation. Promise me you'll be happy. Grandma, promise me. I promise. 2 weeks after the night in the alley, Aria arrived at the Ashford estate to find Eirian pacing in the entrance hall, his expression dark. What's wrong? Nikolai has been seen in New Hampshire, 3 towns over, moving in this direction. Eirian's hands clenched into fists. He is healing faster than I anticipated. And he is angry. I humiliated him, hurt him. He will want revenge. What do? We? There is no we in this, Aria. You will stay far away from whatever happens next. Like hell I will. Eirian turned on her with a flash of anger. This is not a debate. Nikolai is more dangerous than before, unhinged by pain and fury. If he knows you matter to me, and he will know, he has always been clever, he will target you specifically. Then we face him together. No, I will not risk you. You don't get to make that decision alone. Aria crossed her arms, matching his stubborn expression with her own. I'm not some damsel who needs protecting. I'm a partner in this, whether you like it or not, partner. Eirian's laugh was harsh. You are human, fragile. Nikolai could kill you without effort, and you could kill him without me, but maybe it doesn't have to end in killing. Maybe we can find another way. There is no other way. He has broken every law, killed innocents, threatened. Eirian stopped, his jaw tight. He threatened you. In that alley, he looked at you like you were food. For that alone, he dies. The possessive fury in Eirian's voice sent shivers down Aria's spine. This was the vampire in him, the predator who viewed threats to his people as unforgivable. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, maybe he does die, but not without giving him a chance to surrender, to face vampire justice properly. He will not surrender. Probably not. But we have to try. For your sake, not his. Eirian stared at her. My sake? You said he's the last connection to your brother. If you kill him in rage without at least trying for a better solution, you'll regret it. Maybe not now, but in 100 years? 200? You'll remember this moment and wonder if you could have done it differently. Something in Eirian's expression cracked. He crossed to her in 3 quick strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I hate that you are right, he murmured into her hair. I hate that you see me so clearly. I hate that I love you enough to listen to reason when I want only to destroy anything that threatens you. Aria's heart stopped. You love me? Catastrophically. Completely. Against all sense and wisdom. He pulled back to look at her. I fell in love with you that first night, when you threw yourself between me and certain death. No one in 500 years has shown me such loyalty, such reckless courage. How could I not love you? I love you too, Aria whispered. I know it's crazy and fast and probably stupid, but he kissed her, deep and desperate and full of unspoken fears. When they finally broke apart, both were shaking. If anything happens to you because of me, I will never forgive myself, Eirian said. Then don't let anything happen. We're smarter than Nikolai, we're more prepared. We can do this, He smiled despite his worry. When did you become so confident in our ability to face down a rogue vampire? About the same time I fell in love with a vampire king and decided impossible was just another word for challenging. I am not a king, close enough. You're definitely royal and commanding and used to getting your way. Yet somehow you have me completely wrapped around your little human finger. I like to think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement. They spent the rest of the night planning. Eirian contacted other vampires he trusted, calling in favors and information. Aria researched Nikolai's pattern of attacks, trying to predict where he might strike next. They were preparing for war essentially, and the reality of that sat heavy in Aria's stomach. As dawn approached, Eirian grew serious. There is something I must do before this ends. Something I should have done already. What? I must formally claim you as mine under vampire law. It will offer you some protection. Other vampires will know that harming you means facing my wrath and the wrath of House Jäger. But it will also mark you, change you slightly, not turn you but bind us together in ways that cannot easily be undone. Aria's pulse quickened. What does it involve? An exchange of blood. You would drink a small amount of mine, I would drink a small amount of yours. It creates a bond, allows us to sense each other's location and emotional state. In older times it was how vampires marked their most trusted human servants or companions. Will it hurt? No. It will feel intense but not painful. His expression was cautious. It is your choice, Aria. I will not pressure you. But if Nikolai comes for you, if anything happens, the bond would allow me to find you anywhere. Will it change how I feel about you? Make the emotions artificial? No. The bond enhances what is already there, but it creates nothing false. If you do not truly care for me, it will not force you to. Aria considered it was a huge step binding herself to Eirian in this supernatural way. But they were already bound, weren't they? Already tangled in each other's lives beyond any easy separation. Do it, she said. Eirian's eyes widened. Are you certain? I'm certain that I want every advantage we can get for facing Nikolai. I'm certain that I trust you. And I'm certain that whatever this bond is, it won't change what's already between us. He nodded slowly, then retrieved a silver knife from a drawer. Aria recognized it as a match to the one he'd given her. He made a small cut on his palm and dark blood welled up, almost black in the lamplight. Drink, he said, offering his hand. Just a little. Too much would begin the turning process. Aria pressed her lips to his palm and took the smallest sip. The blood was strange on her tongue, metallic and cold and somehow electric. Power sang through it, ancient and vast. She felt it slide down her throat like liquid lightning. Eirian took her hand and made an equally small cut on her palm. She barely felt it. Then his mouth was on her skin, and the sensation was God. It was overwhelming. Not painful, but intensely intimate, more so than any kiss. She felt him drinking, felt something in her reaching out to something in him. The world went white. When Aria's vision cleared, she was sitting on the sofa, Eirian kneeling in front of her with concern written across his face. But she could feel that concern now, actually feel it, like an echo of emotion in her own chest. And underneath it she felt his love, his fear for her, his desperate hope that this would work. I can feel you, she whispered. And I you. Eirian touched her face gently. Your worry, your determination, your love, it is. He closed his eyes. It is beautiful, Aria. Your emotions are so bright and fierce. I had forgotten how intensely humans feel. Aria focused on the bond, following it like a thread connecting them. She could sense Eirian's location in the house, could feel the growing pull of day sleep dragging at him. And deeper, she felt centuries of loneliness, of carefully controlled emotion, of walls built so high that even he had forgotten what lay beneath them. Until now, until her. Get some rest, she said softly. I'll go home, check on my grandmother, try to sleep myself. We'll figure this out tonight. Be careful. The bond works both ways. If you are in danger, I will know. I will come, regardless of the sun. The sun would kill you, and losing you would destroy me. The choice is simple. He kissed her forehead. Go, before I convince myself to keep you here where I can protect you. Aria left reluctantly, but she could feel Eirian through the bond the entire drive home, a constant presence in her mind. It should have been disturbing, this supernatural connection. Instead, it felt right, like a missing piece clicking into place. She was washing blood from her palm when her phone rang. The clinic, calling her in for an emergency. 3-car pileup on the highway, all hands needed. The next 6 hours passed in organized chaos. Aria triaged wounds, assisted the doctor, comforted frightened patients. She was good at this, had always been good at staying calm when everything around her was falling apart. It wasn't until she was washing up afterward that she felt a spike of alarm through the bond. Eirian was awake despite the afternoon sun, and he was afraid. Her phone rang a second later. Aria. His voice was strained. Where are you? The clinic. Car accident. I've been here for hours. What's wrong? Get out. Get out now and get somewhere public. Nikolai is in Millbrook. He attacked a man behind the grocery store. The victim survived, gave a description. It's him. Aria's blood ran cold. Where is he now? I do not know. That is what terrifies me. He is hunting, and I cannot leave the estate while the sun is up. I am trapped here, Wally. His voice broke slightly. Please, Aria, get somewhere safe. I'm going to the police station. I'll be okay. I am coming as soon as the sun sets. Do not leave the station until I arrive. Aria agreed and hung up. She told the clinic staff she needed to leave, making an excuse about her grandmother. Then she grabbed her bag, the one with the silver knife, and headed for her car. The parking lot was empty. Most of the staff had already left, exhausted from the long emergency. Aria's car sat alone in the far corner, where she'd parked this morning in her rush. She was halfway across the asphalt when she felt something wrong. A presence, cold and malicious. She spun around, and there he was. Nikolai looked worse than the last time she'd seen him. His face was gaunt, his clothes torn and blood-stained. His right hand was missing, the stump wrapped in dirty bandages. But his eyes burned with feverish hatred. The human pet, he said, his voice rough. Eirian's little toy, I've been looking for you. Aria's hand dove into her bag, closing around the knife. Stay back. Nikolai laughed, the sound unhinged. Or what, you'll cut me? Please do. I would love an excuse to drain you dry in this parking lot. Eirian will kill you if you touch me. Eirian will kill me anyway. At least this way I'll have the satisfaction of destroying something he loves first. Nikolai moved closer, inhumanly fast. Do you have any idea how long he's been alone? How long since he let anyone matter? And then you came along, playing hero, and suddenly the great Eirian Jäger has a weakness. It's almost funny. Aria backed toward her car, mind racing. She couldn't outrun a vampire. She couldn't fight one either, not really. But maybe she could slow him down. Through the bond, she felt Eirian's terror, his desperate attempts to reach her despite the afternoon sun. She sent back as much calm as she could manage, along with a wordless message. Trust me. Then she pulled the silver knife and slashed it across her own arm. Blood welled up immediately, bright red and tempting. Nikolai froze, his nostrils flaring, his pupils dilating. Fresh human blood was like a drug to vampires, Eirian had explained, almost impossible to resist. That's right, Aria said, holding her bleeding arm out slightly. I know you're hungry. Wounded vampires need blood to heal, don't they? And I bet Eirian's silver bullets are still poisoning your system, making everything harder. Nikolai's tongue darted out to wet his lips. His entire body was trembling with need and rage in equal measure. But if you attack me, Aria continued, you break vampire law. You attack a claimed human. That's an automatic death sentence, and every vampire in the region will hunt you. Is revenge really worth that? I'm already dead, Nikolai growled. Eirian made sure of that, so why not take you with me? He lunged. Aria dove to the side. Not quite fast enough. Nikolai's remaining hand caught her jacket, spinning her around. She felt his breath on her neck, smelled the death on him. Then she brought the silver knife up and drove it into his shoulder. Nikolai screamed, a sound of pure agony. Silver burned vampire flesh like acid. He released her, stumbling back, the knife protruding from his shoulder. Aria ran. She made it 3 steps before Nikolai tackled her from behind. They hit the asphalt hard, Aria's head cracking against the ground. Stars exploded in her vision. Stupid human, Nikolai hissed in her ear. Did you really think silver would stop me? I've lived with silver poisoning for weeks. A little more won't matter. His fangs scraped her throat, and Aria knew she was going to die. She could feel Eirian through the bond, feel his anguish, his helpless rage. She tried to send him love, tried to tell him it wasn't his fault, but everything was going gray and cold. Then someone was pulling Nikolai off her. Aria blinked, trying to focus. Mayor Harrison stood over her, holding a wooden stake in one hand and a gun in the other. Behind him were 5 other men from the village, all armed. "Get away from her," Harrison commanded. Nikolai rose slowly, the silver knife still embedded in his shoulder. His face had transformed into something monstrous, barely recognizable as human. "More insects to swat, how tedious." "We know what you are," Harrison said. "We know you killed our people, and we're not letting you kill Aria too. How noble, how pointless." Nikolai smiled, showing all his fangs. "You think your little weapons will stop me?" "No," said a voice from behind them. "Cold as winter and sharp as broken glass, but I will." Eirian stood at the parking lot entrance, and Aria's heart stopped. Smoke rose from his exposed skin where the late afternoon sun touched him. His face was twisted with pain, but his eyes blazed with fury. "Eirian," Nikolai breathed. "You came into the sun for her. How touching, how stupid. Step away from her now, or I will show you exactly how much pain I can cause before you die." "You're burning," Nikolai pointed out. "How long can you last? A minute? 2? By the time you reach me, you'll be too weak to fight. Try me." They moved simultaneously, 2 blurs of inhuman speed. Aria tried to follow the fight, but it was too fast. She caught glimpses Eirian slamming Nikolai into a car with enough force to crumple metal, Nikolai clawing at Eirian's burned skin, both of them moving with a violence that was beautiful and terrible. Harrison pulled Aria to her feet and dragged her back toward the clinic. "We need to get you inside." "No, I have to help him. He's burning alive in the sun. There's nothing you can do." But there was. Aria could feel Eirian through the bond. Could feel his pain and determination and the terrible damage the sunlight was causing. She reached out through that connection and sent everything she had, her love, her belief in him, her absolute refusal to let him sacrifice himself. Live, she commanded through the bond. Win and live. For me, she felt his response like a physical thing, a surge of renewed strength. Eirian caught Nikolai's throat in one burned hand and lifted him off the ground. "You were my family," Eirian said, his voice rough with pain and grief. "I gave you every chance, showed you every mercy. But you threatened what is mine. You tried to kill the woman I love. For that, there is no forgiveness." "Then do it," Nikolai gasped. "Kill me like you killed my father, like you kill everyone who gets too close. That's what you do, Eirian. You destroy." "No." Eirian's other hand came up, also smoking in the sun. "I protect." There was a wet tearing sound. Nikolai's body went limp, then began to crumble, turning to ash and dust. In seconds, all that remained was a pile of gray powder on the asphalt, and Eirian standing alone, his skin blistered and raw. He swayed, took a step toward the clinic's shadow, then collapsed. Aria was there before he hit the ground, catching him, screaming for help. Harrison and the others rushed over. Together they dragged Eirian into the clinic, into the dark, away from the killing sun. In the dim interior, Aria assessed the damage. Eirian's skin was burned severely anywhere it had been exposed, his face, his hands, his neck. He was unconscious, his breathing so shallow she could barely detect it. "What can we do?" Harrison asked. "Blood. He needs blood to heal." Aria looked at the mayor. "And I need you to not ask questions and not tell anyone about this. Ever." Harrison nodded. "I owe him. He saved Jennifer Walsh. He saved you. Whatever you need, then get everyone out except you, lock the doors, and find me an IV kit." For the next hour, Aria worked. She set up an IV line from Harrison to Eirian, letting donated blood flow directly into the vampire's veins. It wasn't ideal. Vampire healing required drinking, the act of feeding itself triggering regeneration. But it was better than nothing. Slowly, painfully slowly, Eirian's wounds began to close. His burned skin knitted itself back together, leaving raw pink patches that gradually faded. His breathing deepened. After 40 minutes, his eyes opened. "Aria," he whispered. "I'm here, you're safe. Nikolai is dead. The son, you survived. You're going to be fine." Her voice broke. "You complete idiot. You could have died. You were in danger. Nothing else mattered." He tried to sit up, grimaced, and lay back down. "Is he truly gone? Is it over?" "It's over. You turned him to dust." Something complex crossed Eirian's face, grief and relief and regret all mixed together. "He was family. He was a killer who had to be stopped. You did the right thing. Did I? Or did I simply destroy the last piece of my brother I had left?" Aria leaned down and kissed him gently, carefully, mindful of his healing burns. "You protected innocent people. You protected me. That's what matters." Mayor Harrison cleared his throat. "I'll give you two some privacy. But Aria, when you're ready, we need to talk about how to handle this." After Harrison left, Aria helped Eirian sit up. The IV line had been removed, having served its purpose. Eirian looked exhausted, older somehow despite his immortality. "What happens now?" Aria asked. "Will other vampires come? Will there be consequences for what happened? There will be an inquiry. The vampire councils will want to know why I was forced to execute a member of House Jäger on human soil in broad daylight. But I have documented Nikolai's crimes, have witnesses to his attacks. The judgment will be in my favor. He took her hand, his grip weak but warmer than usual, heated by the borrowed blood. You were brilliant. That trick with your own blood, buying time until help arrived. Reckless and terrifying, but brilliant. I learned from the best. I nearly lost you today. His voice cracked. Feeling your fear through the bond while I was trapped by sunlight, unable to reach you, it was the longest hour of my existence. But you came anyway. You walked into the sun for me. I would walk into fire for you. Into the sun, into death itself. You must know that by now. Aria knew. She felt it through the bond, the depth of his love, the absolute conviction. And she felt her own love mirrored back, just as deep, just as absolute. I don't want to leave you, she said quietly. I know I have to, my grandmother, my life, all of it, but I don't want to. Then don't. Not permanently, but stay with me while I heal. A few days. Let me keep you close where I know you are safe. People will talk, let them. Eirian managed to smile. I am a vampire. You are my claimed companion. The time for hiding is past. If you want this, want me, then I will not ask you to keep it secret. I want you. I want this. But Eirian, my grandmother is in good hands at her care facility. You have been caring for her alone for too long, trying to be everything for everyone. Let me care for you for a change. Aria felt tears prick her eyes. He was right. She'd been running herself into exhaustion trying to be nurse, caregiver, hero, all at once. The thought of letting someone else carry the weight for a while was almost overwhelming. Okay, she whispered. A few days, Eirian agreed. And then we will determine what comes next together. They stayed at the clinic until full dark, Eirian recovering his strength. Harrison arranged for Aria's car to be brought to the estate, arranged for the mess in the parking lot to be cleaned up, arranged for the official story to be that a transient had attacked Aria and been scared off by good Samaritans. I'm getting good at cover-ups, Harrison said wryly. Never thought I'd be helping hide vampire incidents, but here we are. Thank you, Aria said sincerely. For everything, for believing, for helping. You threw yourself in front of a mob for him. You clearly see something in him worth protecting. That's good enough for me. Harrison looked at Eirian, who was sitting quietly, still weak. Keep her safe. We've lost enough people in Millbrook. I'd hate to lose her too. She will be safer than I am, Eirian promised. That I can guarantee. They returned to the estate after dark, Eirian driving carefully, his hands still healing. Inside, he led Aria to the master bedroom, a stunning room with heavy curtains and furniture that had to be centuries old. Rest, he commanded. You have been awake nearly 24 hours. So have you. I am used to it. You are not. He pulled back the covers on the massive bed. Sleep. I will be here when you wake. Aria wanted to argue, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. She kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the bed, asleep almost before her head hit the pillow. She woke to darkness and the feeling of Eirian sitting beside her, one hand gently stroking her hair. Through the bond, she felt his relief, his love, his lingering fear. How long did I sleep? 14 hours. I was beginning to worry you would sleep forever. Aria sat up, rubbing her eyes. Her body ached, covered in bruises from the fight with Nikolai. You should have woken me. Why? You needed rest. And he paused. I needed to watch you breathe, to assure myself you were truly safe. Humor me. Through the bond, Aria felt the depth of his lingering trauma. He'd spent hours thinking he would lose her, unable to help, burning alive in the sun. She understood the need to verify her safety now. I'm okay, she said softly. We're both okay. We survived. That is not quite the same as okay. Eirian's hand cupped her face. I have lived for 5 centuries. I have survived wars and plagues and dangers you cannot imagine. But today, when I felt you in danger and couldn't reach you, that was the closest I have come to understanding human fear. The terror of losing someone irreplaceable. You're irreplaceable to me too, foolish human. I am old and dangerous and completely unsuitable. And I love you anyway. Catastrophically poor judgment on your part. Aria laughed and pulled him down for a kiss. It was gentle at first, then deepened, both of them needing the physical reassurance that the other was real, alive, present. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. I should check on my grandmother, Aria said reluctantly. I've been gone too long. I arranged for a nurse to sit with her today. Someone from the facility staff. She is well cared for, Eirian. Let me care for you, he said again. Please, stay with me a little longer. There is something I must discuss with you. Something important. Aria's stomach fluttered with anxiety, but she nodded. They went downstairs to the library where Eirian had prepared coffee and breakfast, real food, which he must have sent someone to purchase. You're plotting something, Aria said as she ate. I can feel it through the bond. Not plotting, considering possibilities. Eirian sat across from her, his expression serious. Aria, I have been alone for decades because I believed it was easier, safer. But you have shown me that safety without connection is just another form of death. I do not want to be alone anymore. Okay. There are ways for a human and vampire to be together long-term. Difficult ways, but possible. Aria's heart began to race. Are you talking about turning me? No, I meant what I said. I will not destroy your humanity. But there are intermediate options, binding rituals that extend human lifespan, slow aging. They would not make you immortal, but they would give us decades instead of years. Time to truly know each other, to build something lasting. What's the cost? The rituals require powerful vampire blood, rare ingredients, and sanction from the councils. They are not easy to obtain. And once done, you would be tied to me irrevocably. My death would mean your death as well. But I would age, eventually die? Yes, but slowly. A human who underwent the full binding at your age might live to 200, aging gracefully rather than declining rapidly. Eirian leaned forward. I am not asking you to decide now. I am simply telling you the options exist. If you want to explore them, to consider a future that includes both of us, it is possible. Aria's mind spun. The thought of 200 years was staggering. But 200 years with Eirian, years to love him without the specter of her mortality constantly looming, that was tempting beyond words. I need to think about it, she said. Of course, take all the time you need. He smiled slightly. I have learned patience over 5 centuries. I can wait a little longer. They spent the next 3 days in a strange sort of bubble. Aria visited her grandmother each morning, spent time ensuring she was comfortable and cared for. The rest of her time was Eirian's. He showed her the parts of his world she hadn't seen yet, the hidden vampire clubs in the city an hour away, the network of safe houses and businesses owned by immortals. He introduced her to other vampires, members of his house who'd come to pay respects after Nikolai's death. They were fascinating, these other immortals. Some were ancient like Eirian, carrying themselves with similar grace and weariness. Others were younger, still adjusting to their transformation. All of them treated Aria with careful respect once they understood she was claimed by Eirian, that she wore his blood bond. They're afraid of you, Aria said after one particularly tense meeting. They respect my bloodline and my age. I am among the oldest of my house, and I have executed vampires before for breaking our laws. Fear and respect are often indistinguishable among immortals. Do you like being feared? I like being left alone to live as I choose. Fear accomplishes that. He looked at her. Does it bother you? Knowing I am capable of inspiring such terror? No, because I also know you're capable of walking into the sun to save someone you love. You contain multitudes, Eirian. That's what makes you interesting. Interesting. What a diplomatic word for dangerous and occasionally terrifying. I stand by interesting. On the 4th day, Aria's grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep. Aria had been sitting with her, holding her hand, when the old woman simply stopped breathing. There was no drama, no final words, just a gentle ending to a long life. Aria cried for hours afterward, great racking sobs of grief and relief and complicated love. Eirian held her through all of it, offering no platitudes or false comfort, just steady presence. Through the bond she felt his empathy, his own memories of loss echoing against hers. I'm sorry, she managed eventually. I'm making a mess of your shirt. I have other shirts. I do not have another you. The funeral was simple, well attended by people who'd known her grandmother for decades. Aria stood at the graveside and felt the weight of finality. This chapter of her life was closing. What came next was uncertain. After the service, as people dispersed, Mayor Harrison approached her. What will you do now? Stay in Millbrook? Aria looked at the sky, the clouds, the familiar landscape of her childhood home. Then she looked at Eirian, standing at a respectful distance, giving her space to grieve. I don't know yet, she admitted. I need to figure some things out. For what it's worth, you'll always have a place here. You've done a lot for this town, Aria, more than most people know. Harrison glanced at Eirian. Both of you have. That night, Aria and Eirian sat in the library of the Ashford estate, the fire crackling, snow falling outside the windows. It was a moment suspended in time, peaceful and perfect, and achingly temporary. I've made my decision, Aria said. Eirian tensed. About the binding rituals? Yes, I want to do it. I want the years, the time. I want a future with you. Aria, you must be absolutely certain. This is not, I know what I'm giving up. I know what I'm choosing, and I'm certain. She took his hand. You asked me what I wanted that first night I came here. I want this. I want you. I want to see where this impossible thing between us leads. Eirian pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was something precious and fragile. You will never regret this. I swear to you I will spend every day of your extended life ensuring you never regret choosing me. That's a long time to keep someone happy. Decades. I have had centuries to practice patience, devotion, and determination. I will manage. They kissed, deep and sure, and through the bond Aria felt Eirian's joy, his relief, his overwhelming love. She sent back her own emotions, letting him feel her certainty, her happiness, her complete lack of doubt. When can we do the ritual? She asked. It will take time to arrange. The councils must approve. The ingredients must be gathered. Perhaps a month. A month. Aria smiled. I can wait a month. What's a month when we're planning for decades? An eternity and an instant, depending on perspective. The next weeks passed in a flurry of activity. Eirian called in favors. negotiated with vampire councils, arranged for the ritual components to be collected. Aria settled her grandmother's affairs, sold the house, and gradually moved her belongings to the Ashford estate. Millbrook adjusted to their relationship with surprising speed. Some people whispered, of course, but most had seen enough to know that Eirian had protected their town, that he was strange but not evil. The mayor quietly spread the word that Aria was under official vampire protection, that anyone threatening her would answer to both human and supernatural law. It created an odd peace. Humans and vampires weren't exactly friendly, but they coexisted, aware of each other's presence. Maintaining a careful détente, Aria continued working at the clinic part-time, unwilling to completely give up her nursing. Eirian continued his isolated existence, but now with Aria as his companion, his home no longer felt quite so much like a tomb. The ritual took place on a clear winter night, exactly 1 month after her grandmother's funeral. It was conducted by an ancient vampire woman named Serafina, someone Eirian trusted implicitly. The ceremony was beautiful, and strange blood mixed with rare herbs, words spoken in languages older than English, magic that made Aria's skin tingle. When it was complete, Aria felt different. Not dramatically, not obviously, but subtly. Her heartbeat seemed stronger, steadier. Colors appeared brighter. Through the bond, Eirian's presence felt even more solid, more permanent. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like myself, but more so." Aria flexed her fingers, testing. "Is that normal?" "Perfectly normal. The changes will continue gradually over the next few months as the ritual settles. You may notice enhanced healing, greater resistance to illness, slower aging. But you are still human, still you." "How long do we have?" Eirian smiled, and it was full of hope. "According to Serafina's calculations, if the ritual worked perfectly and she is never wrong, you will live approximately 150 to 200 years, aging normally until about 70, then much more slowly afterward." "That's longer than I expected." "Is it too long?" "No, it's perfect." Aria laughed, suddenly giddy. "It's a lifetime, multiple lifetimes, it's everything." He kissed her then, deep and passionate and full of promise. Around them the ancient house settled into silence, a monument to the past sheltering their future. 2 years later, Aria stood in the gardens of the Ashford estate, watching the sun set over Millbrook. The town had changed in subtle ways. More vampires had moved in, drawn by the peaceful coexistence that had developed. A supernatural community center had opened downtown. Humans and vampires didn't exactly mingle, but they acknowledged each other, traded with each other, existed side by side. She'd changed too. The ritual had left her stronger, healthier. At 29, she looked barely older than the day she'd first met Eirian. Her work at the clinic had expanded to include treating vampire injuries, making her one of the few humans with practical medical knowledge of both species. Footsteps approached from behind, and she didn't need the bond to know who it was. Eirian's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "Admiring your handiwork," he asked. "Our handiwork. This peace, this community, we built it together." "You built it. I simply stood behind you, looking intimidating." "You do intimidating very well. I have had 500 years to practice." They stood together as the stars emerged, as the lights of Millbrook flickered to life below. It wasn't a perfect peace, nothing ever was. There were still tensions, still challenges, still complications from mixing human and vampire worlds. But it was real, it was theirs, and it was enough. "I've been thinking," Aria said. "Dangerous activity. We should travel. You've seen the world a dozen times over, but I've barely left New England. Show me your favorite places. Tell me the stories behind your memories. That could take decades. Good thing we have them." Eirian turned her in his arms, his expression soft with love. "You saved my life, you know, not just from the mob, but from myself. I was half dead already, going through the motions of existence without truly living. Then you walked into my life, all fierce courage and stubborn compassion, and you reminded me what it meant to be alive. Pretty sure you saved me too. I was so focused on duty and responsibility that I'd forgotten what it felt like to want something just for myself. And now I want everything, the travel, the adventure, the years ahead. I want lazy mornings and dramatic rescues and complicated vampire politics. I want boring domesticity and exciting danger in equal measure. I want life in all its messy, impossible glory. With me, always with you." They kissed as the last light faded from the sky, as the vampire world stirred to life around them. Inside the house, their home lights glowed warm and welcoming. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always new challenges. But tonight they had peace, love, and the promise of decades stretching ahead. It had started with torches and fear, with a woman throwing herself between a mob and a vampire, willing to die for what she believed was right. It had grown into something neither of them could have predicted, a bond deeper than blood, stronger than magic, more enduring than time. And it was only the beginning. In the years that followed, Aria and Eirian became legends in their own right. The vampire who walked into the sun for love, the human who stood against her own people to protect a monster, Their story was told in vampire courts and human taverns, embellished and romanticized until it bore little resemblance to the truth. But they didn't mind. They were too busy living their truth to worry about how others interpreted it. They traveled, as Aria had wanted. Eirian showed her Rome and Paris, Tokyo and Cairo. They visited vampire sanctuaries hidden beneath ancient cities, met immortals whose stories would have filled libraries. Aria learned to navigate the complex politics of vampire society, earned respect in her own right as someone who understood both worlds. They returned to Millbrook regularly, maintaining their home, continuing their work. The town became a model for human-vampire relations, studied by councils and governments. Aria's clinic expanded, training other humans in supernatural medicine. Eirian opened his estate for vampire gatherings, hosting councils and negotiations. The bond between them deepened with each passing year. Sometimes it was a comfort, feeling each other's presence at all times. Sometimes it was frustrating, having no secrets, no privacy of emotion. But always it was real. Aria aged gracefully as the ritual had promised. At 50, she looked perhaps 35, still vital and strong. At 70, she seemed barely middle-aged. At 100, she was a marvel, ancient by human standards, but young by vampire ones. Existing in the space between two worlds, Eirian never aged at all, of course. He remained frozen at whatever age he'd been turned, eternal and unchanging. But he grew in other ways, softer, more open, less burdened by the weight of centuries. Aria's love had healed something in him, filled a void he'd carried so long he'd forgotten it existed. They had their challenges. Periods of struggle when Aria mourned her lost humanity, when Eirian wrestled with guilt for changing her fate. Times when the bond felt like a chain rather than a connection. Arguments that leveraged centuries of experience against decades of human wisdom. But they also had joy. Quiet mornings watching sunrise together, Aria safe in the shadows with Eirian. Laughter over inside jokes that spanned lifetimes. The deep satisfaction of partnership, of facing the world as a united force. And always, always they had love. The catastrophic, foolish, impossible love that had begun the night. Aria threw herself between a mob and a vampire king, choosing courage over fear, faith over certainty. On Aria's 150th birthday, they renewed their bond in a ceremony attended by vampires and humans alike. She was ancient now, her hair silver white, her face lined with the map of a long life well lived. But her eyes were still bright, her spirit still fierce. "Do you regret it?" Eirian asked her that night, as they stood in the same gardens where they'd had so many conversations over the years. "Choosing this life, tying yourself to me?" Aria looked at him, her vampire, her love, her impossible miracle, and smiled. "Not for a single second. Every moment has been worth it. Every joy, every struggle, every strange and beautiful turn our lives have taken. I chose you, and I would choose you again in every lifetime. Even knowing how it ends, that your years are still numbered while mine continue. Even knowing that. We don't get forever, Eirian, but we got this. And this has been magnificent." They kissed beneath the stars in the garden of their home, surrounded by the life they'd built together. It was a kiss that tasted of past and present, of memory and promise, of the impossible made real through sheer stubborn devotion. When Aria died, peacefully in her sleep at the age of 179, Eirian held her hand just as she'd once held her grandmother's. He felt the exact moment her soul departed, felt the bond between them stretch and finally gently release. The pain was devastating, the loss incomprehensible. For days he could not move, could not speak, could barely think through the grief. But he did not choose the final sleep. He did not end his existence, tempting as it was, because Aria had made him promise years before that he would continue, that he would take the love she'd given him and use it to fuel a life worth living, that he would honor her memory, not through despair but through action. So Eirian lived. He grieved, yes, would grieve for centuries to come. But he also lived. He continued their work, expanding the peace they'd built. He took in younger vampires, taught them the codes and ethics Aria had helped him remember mattered. He protected Millbrook with the same fierce devotion he'd shown her, and sometimes in the quiet hours before dawn, he would stand in the gardens and feel her presence like a ghost of the bond they'd shared. Not real, perhaps. Just memory and longing and the echo of the most profound connection of his long existence. But real enough to sustain him through the centuries ahead. Real enough to prove that love, even impossible love, even love between a human and a vampire, could transcend death itself. The whole village had once raised torches against him. But one woman had thrown herself between them, choosing faith over fear. And from that single act of courage had grown a love story that would be told for generations by vampires and humans alike as proof that the impossible was simply another word for challenging. That even in darkness, light could be found. That even ancient monsters could be redeemed by love. That sometimes the bravest thing you could do was stand between what you believed in and those who would destroy it, and trust that courage would be enough. And it had been enough.